Hi, and welcome back to our second episode of our weekly feature, Talk of Purdue, where Jeff Berglund and I talk about some of the biggest news of the week.
As we promised, we'll be taking a look back at the last Board of Trustees meeting, and especially one of its newest members, Miranda McCormack, the student representative on the board.
Miranda is a sophomore majoring in chemical engineering, which coincidentally is the same major as the former student trustee, Tyler Teckel. Miranda served on the Academic Affairs Committee, which met on Monday afternoon, and Jeff and I were both there for that committee meeting. So Jeff, how do you think she did?
I thought she did pretty well. You could tell she was a little nervous at first, that she was kind of concerned about, asking a question or making her comments known, which I'm sure being at the table with 9 of, the most successful people in Indiana, that you'd not want to look like an idiot when you're asking a question about something or asking an obvious question that everyone in the room knows the answer to. But I could tell she warmed up a little bit as it went, and she was asked actually what I thought was a really good question to Morgan Burke, and Morgan Burke's reply prompted an entire story that I wrote for the paper the following day. So I thought that was good. I was near the end, and you could tell she was warming up. So what did you think?
I thought the same thing. I think that at the committee meeting she was a little shy, but again, that room can be incredibly intimidating, especially for someone who hasn't spent a whole lot of time there. But I talked to her after the board meeting on Tuesday, and she said that she was having a lot of fun, and the same thing that you just mentioned, that she was sitting at a table with the most successful people to ever graduate from Purdue. So that in itself is both an incredible opportunity and a little bit intimidating.
Well, she gained some immediate points in my book when I saw her reading an exponent before the committee meeting started to brief herself up, because,
That's true.
How could you possibly take part in a Board of Trustees meeting without reading our paper first? But
So the students have their new trustee, but a point raised at the stated meeting on Tuesday was that faculty do not have a representative on the Board of Trustees. And the new chair of the University Senate, Morris Levy, brought up that exact point to trustees and said that he and his University Senate will be making a push for a faculty representative to sit on the Board of Trustees. Now, we looked into it afterward because we found that to be really interesting. And in order for a faculty representative or even another member to join the Board of Trustees, the state legislature would have to amend a code because, if you didn't know, every trustee is appointed by the state and by Governor Mitch Daniels. So it's going to take state action to bring this faculty representative to Purdue. It's not something that the president or even the trustees could do. So Jeff and I thought it would be fun to give you our nominations of who this next faculty representative on the board should be. So Jeff, why don't you tell us your recommendation?
my nomination would be Derek Pacheco, a little-known, foul-mouthed assistant English professor who I had last semester for American literature. Pacheco is probably the only person, maybe in the entire world, who could make Puritan literature interesting. He would link it to The Simpsons, and he would make all kinds of jokes that related to my generation, and he would definitely throw in the occasional four-letter word where he saw it appropriate. Those Board of Trustees meetings can lag on and get a little boring, and I think that with Pacheco in there, he'd be mixing it up, he'd be asking questions, he'd be throwing swear words around, and I don't think anybody in the room would ever accidentally fall asleep thanks to the dragging on of the meeting. Who's your nomination, Alisha?
My nomination is the department head of anthropology, Ellen Groombaum, who I've had in a couple classes, who is just fantastic. She's an amazing lecturer. She's done the most incredible research. She always has a couple wild stories about what her days of doing field work in Africa and Sudan were like, so that could also be an interesting point for the Board of Trustees. I think she's another person who could really mix up those meetings, because though they are very important and very important things happen there, they can tend to drag on. And I was at Tuesday's meeting from start to finish, and that was probably a total of 4.5 hours. So either having Pacheco or Gruenbaum there or anyone else, I think could be a nice welcome change. So last week we told you that the big news of this week was Board of Trustees, but there's also a pretty big piece of news coming out of Monday's Board of Works meeting at the city. And it was that Mayor John Dennis named Gumball Alley, which is the alleyway in between Brothers Bar and Underground Printing, a state of emergency for the city, which sounds really serious to me, but I've walked by Gumball Alley and always just kind of held my nose, but unlike Jeff here, I am not a frequent bar goer, so I don't know a whole lot about what Gumball Alley is really like, so why don't you enlighten the viewers, Jeff, and let us know?
Well, Mayor Dennis called the smell putrid, and I would agree. I always thought that the smell came from people who left the bars and ended up puking in the alleyway on their way home, but apparently gravel got into the sewer system and caused backup, which then the smell rose from the system. I'm still skeptical. If you look at the picture, that to me looks like a puddle of puke laying there in the alley, but maybe not.
So, citizens of West Lafayette, adhere to this emergency and avoid Gumball Alley.
And try not to puke in there,
As
people
well.
leaving the bar, because it smells bad enough with whatever that's going on in that sewer system. We don't need a few Jaeger bombs chucked up into the alleyway.
So we'll be back again here in the Exponent Library next week for our third talk of Purdue. While Jeff and I were at the Board of Trustees meeting this week, we received a very nice compliment from the chairman of the board, Keith Kroc, who said that he watched our video last week and enjoyed it. So Chairman Kroc, if you're watching again this week, we hope you enjoyed this week as well. And for everyone else, we'll see you again next Friday.
Have a good weekend and try not to turn up on our police beat next week.